The whole point in today's class, the whole point in storytelling at all is that you want people to care. If you want to make a difference, if you want to move people, if you want to spur people to action, then you have to tell stories that make people care. So how do we do that? Maya Angelou said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So it's not just about what you say or do, it's the way you make people feel. And that's what we want to do in our storytelling. We want to make people feel something. So let's go on a little journey from listening to really moving people to care. And how do we do that? This is what you need to know in order to tell a story. So first, you need to meet people where they are. And this is a really important part of the process. I would say that it's the most important part in the process. And what I mean by this is it's really easy for us to take our own experience, our own bias, our own perceptions, and tell a story about other people. But if you're actually going to tell a good story, if you're going to tell a story that moves people to action, that really inspires people to care, you need to meet people where they are. Go into communities, get to know people, talk to them, learn what they care about, learn their language, learn the customs and the culture and the traditions. Really spend some time investing in that relationship with the people whose story you're telling. And I think a really easy way to think about this is when you enter a party, you don't walk through the door and immediately announce yourself. Hi, I'm Jordan, I'm at the party, and expect everyone to flock to you and just tell you everything that they know and everything that they feel. It takes some time. So you walk into the party, you get some snacks, maybe you order a drink, and then you start walking around the room and you're talking with people and you introduce yourselves and you try to find things that are in common. And then once you do that, you start building trust. And that trust is what's going to allow people to open up and share the way that they're feeling, the things that they think. And then you'll be able to communicate that in a much more meaningful way. But you have to meet people where they are first in order to build that trust and really get to know the story that you want to tell. The next thing is you want to ask the right questions. Now, it's really easy to ask people what their story is. And it's easy to ask people what happened. It's kind of like a book report. How many of you did a book report in high school? You read a book and then you had to report on that book back to your class. Totally, we've all done those book reports. The most boring book reports were when you just recounted the plot. When you said this happened and then this happened and then next that happened and then it ended. Well, you've given away the whole story in or the whole plot of the book, but you didn't allow us to feel the things that we were feeling, that the book gives you an opportunity to do. It's so enriching when you couple the plot with the way that you feel about the plot. So asking the right questions allows the people whose story you're telling, or maybe it's even the story you're telling of yourself. If you ask yourself the right questions, you start painting this beautiful picture. It's full of imagery that evokes real feeling. So by asking the right questions, you want to make sure you get answers that paint visual images. So instead of asking someone what happened, ask them how they feel about the things that happened. A person that really mastered this strategy was Martin Luther King. And in his 1963 I Have a Dream speech, he said these things. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. He went on to say, I have a dream that one day in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day, right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. Now, the reason I used this as an example was that King was a master at visual imagery. Satisfy your thirst. We all know what that's like. We've all been thirsty. Drinking from the cup of bitterness. Can you imagine taking a giant swig of a really bitter drink? Just sounds horrible. So those are images that we can paint as King is telling this story about the dream that he has. I love that the phrase governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition. That is such a visual image. So when you're telling your story, you want to ask questions that paint visual images. And if you're wondering how to do this, once you've told your story or you've conducted your interview or you've made your video, go back and as you're reviewing it, try to sketch little pictures of the things that you see when you hear that story. Are you able to paint a picture in your mind? And if not, perhaps go back and try to infuse the story with some more visuals. The next thing you want to do is paint a holistic picture. Now, I could tell you the story of a thunderstorm, how it rolled in and it was really loud and the lightning struck down trees and it started fires and the power went out and it was terrifying and the water flooded my driveway and the storm was just horrible. But that's not a whole picture of the thunderstorm. I didn't tell you about the colors that transcended anything I've ever seen in nature. The sky was purple and pink and orange, and the clouds rolled as if they were a herd of horses running on the beach. And then the rain that poured nourished our crops and fed our community for months to come. So there's the good and the bad, and painting that holistic picture is really important for a couple of reasons. I think Dolly Parton probably said it best. She said, the way I see it, if you want the rainbow, you got to put up with the rain. So this is important because maybe in your story, some people are experiencing a rainbow. You know, they're feeling the good times. The storm is over and they're able to celebrate all the goodness and the brightness and the color and the joy of life. And it's a good reminder for them, the storm that they went through, the bad parts, the rain, the challenges, the obstacles. But also your story may be hitting people in a time when they are experiencing the rain, when they are in the tough parts of life. And if you don't talk about the rainbow, then the story just feels hopeless and desperate. And it's important to paint that holistic picture so that you know that it's a journey, that it's not always going to be just one way. This is also a really important point because painting a holistic picture encourages us to include multiple perspectives, multiple angles. So this is really important. It's always been important, but it's a lesson that a lot of us have only recently learned. That when we tell stories, we're not just telling these stories through a white, cisgender, heterosexual perspective. This point is really important for racial justice, for human rights, for social justice, for queer equality. So painting a holistic picture is really important if you want to make an impact in the world. It can't just be through one monolithic perspective. We need to tell that whole picture. Next, you want concrete calls to action. So this one seems pretty easy, right? But it's the part of storytelling that most people get wrong. Now, studies have showed that most people respond very well to the more concrete an action is. I'll give you an example. I could say at the end of my story, go make people happy. Now that's a really good call to action. We want to make people happy. Everybody deserves to be happy, right? But if I were to say to you today, go make people happy, you would have a million different ways to accomplish that goal. And it's not specific enough. And since there's so many different ways to take that action, you may just not do it at all because you don't have a lot of direction. It's not something you just know how to do immediately. You can't just execute the action. So let's make it a little more specific. Go make one person smile today. That's way more concrete. You're going and you're reaching one person and your objective is to make them smile. So now we have a much more concrete action that we can go out and do. I know how to make someone happy by making one person smile today. Let's make it even more specific and tie it into the mission or vision of our organization or our goal or somehow back into the story. So what if we said, go make one person smile today by giving them our chocolates? Perhaps you own a chocolate company, and the mission of your chocolate company is to make people happy. So the call to action could be make someone smile by giving them our chocolates. Now that call to action ties back into your mission, and it's part of a holistic story that you're telling about your company. So concrete calls to action are really important. And the converse is true too, that if you don't have this concrete call to action, people actually disengage and be disinterested in the story that you're telling. So it's a really important part of storytelling. Lastly, we have to tell the best stories. Now this one seems like a no-brainer. And like, of course, we all want to tell the best stories, right? But even if you did everything we've talked about today, you might not tell the best story. There are a couple of things that you need to keep in mind when you're storytelling. And a couple of examples are, you don't want to spoon feed people. Your audience is smart. They've been conditioned just as long as you have to know a good story when they hear it. When they were kids, they also heard Once Upon a Time. So we've all been really conditioned to tell stories, to listen to stories. So don't give them everything. Leave a little bit to be desired. Here's an example. One bone-chilling night, the snow was wetting my hair as I walked home from the grocery store. My bag broke and a jar busted on the sidewalk. Someone pulled over to help. We ended up having a drink and falling in love. Now, I told you that little story, but I left a lot of details out. I didn't tell you where I was, what city I was in. You may have imagined me on the sidewalks of New York City or on the campus of Troy University. You may have imagined a jar of pickles falling from my bag, or it could have been a jar of Nutella. There's no telling. That was your detail to infuse into the story. You may have imagined someone that you love when I told you about me falling in love over some hot chocolate. Maybe we were in a bar, maybe we were at a coffee shop, or maybe it was in the lobby of the apartment building, who knows? But leaving a little bit of detail out of the story is actually a good thing. It gives people an opportunity to see themselves in the story that you're telling. Another way that you can tell the best story is to use your themes and the plot points of your story devices, as a way to uncover a surprise. Anthony Bourdain did this really well in his show Parts Unknown. So it was a show about cooking and travel, but what he did when he took us into these different cities around the world, different places, rural villages, he exposed injustice, he exposed poverty, he exposed misogyny, and he also exposed a lot of triumph, the goodness, the best of humanity. But it was all through the guise of food and travel. So you might be telling a story that's about something really large, like food, a really big category, but you use that to drill down and tell a story about something really important. Food scarcity in rural communities across the country. So your best stories are the ones that leave something to be desired and also surprise us when they uncover something unexpected. Let's do a little recap here. So first of all, dreams are stories that we experience, much like life. But then we have to figure out how to share them. That usually happens in some sort of structure, a 3-act structure, a narrative arc. We're all conditioned to learn, to hear and tell those kinds of stories, just like we always have been. We've always heard those kinds of stories. The challenge is life doesn't always fit that 3-act structure, but impactful stories do. If you're going to tell a story that makes a difference, you have to put it into a structure that people understand and can relate to. Now, there are 5 ways to make people care about the story that you're telling. You want to meet people where they are. You want to ask the right questions so that people speak in visual language. You want to paint holistic pictures so that your story is not monolithic and biased with one perspective. You want to create concrete calls to action so that people know exactly how to do what you're asking and it's already a part of their daily activity. And then you want to tell the best stories by leaving a little bit to be desired, allowing people to infuse their own narrative into the story, and surprising people by uncovering something unexpected. Those are the best ways I think that you can tell a story. Now, I didn't spend a lot of time talking about the work that we do at VideoOut, but I'd love to continue the conversation. We've traveled all around the United States We've recorded stories from about 400 different people over the course of the last 5 years. And this format, this lesson that I've taught today, is the culmination of about 5 years of storytelling experience. So we've tried a lot of different things. We've told some stories that didn't resonate at all, but following this method, we found it to be really, really impactful. When we tell stories following this method, people listen and then they're moved to action. So I'm excited to connect with you all on the floor. Can't wait to continue the conversation. If you ever want to know anything about storytelling, I'm really, really down and really excited to chat. Thank you so much for your time.